Coming up on the program, teachers in France embark on nationwide strike against government's changing COVID rules for schools. Director of the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says more than 10 million COVID cases have been recorded on the continent. Plus, President of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, Poland, warns Europe is closer to war than it has been at any time in the last 30 years. Thanks for staying with us. I'm Amarachi Ubani in Lagos. Teachers in France have embarked on a nationwide strike action against the government's handling of the coronavirus crisis. Ministers have made keeping schools open a priority despite a recent surge in COVID-19 cases. Here's more in the Global Update.
The teachers say government COVID rules in schools are confusing and constantly changing, and blame the government and Education Minister Jean-Michel Blanquer for what they call a chaotic situation in schools. The main trigger was France's health protocol, which has changed a number of times since December. Under rules announced on January the 2nd, a day before the start of the new school year, students exposed to a COVID case were required to take an antigen or PCR test and then self-test 2 and then 4 days later to continue classes in person. As coronavirus infections surge, the rule change caused massive pressure on testing capacity with long queues seen outside pharmacies. In the meantime, France has relaxed its restrictions for those traveling from the UK from Friday. Vaccinated travelers will no longer need a compelling reason to enter France or self-isolate when they arrive, but a negative COVID-19 test taken 24 hours before leaving the UK will be required, vaccinated or not. South Korea is preparing to begin treating coronavirus patients with Pfizer's antiviral pills on Friday, the first Asian country to do so, as concerns mount over the spread of the highly contagious Omicron variant. The pill, called Paxlovid, is numbering about 630,000 for 21,000 people arrived today to be distributed to 280 pharmacies and 90 residential treatment centers. The medication will be used to treat more than 1,000 people a day, with priority groups including patients at high risk of severe illnesses, those aged 65 or more, and those with reduced immunity. China's Tianjin city has reported an increase of COVID-19 infections as it steps up efforts to rein in an outbreak that has spread the highly transmissible Omicron variant to another Chinese city. Tianjin, located in northern China, reported 41 domestically transmitted infections with confirmed symptoms on Wednesday, up from 33 a day earlier, according to data from the National Health Commission.
In the meantime, World Health Director, Regional Director for Eastern Mediterranean Office on COVID-19 developments, Ahmed Al-Mandari, says a shocking surge in COVID-19 cases across the region was probably due to the Omicron variant of the disease. It was as some countries in the group still have very low vaccination rates. Mr. Al-Mandari says reports said cases in the region rose 89% in the first week of January from a week earlier, but the deaths fell by 13%. Out of 22 mostly Middle Eastern countries in the region, 15 have already officially reported cases of the highly infectious Omicron variant. Mandari says 6 countries in the region, that is Afghanistan, Djibouti, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen, have vaccinated less than 10% of their populations, despite having enough vaccines to protect up to 40%. Just 36 countries worldwide have similarly low vaccination rates. He believes vaccination campaigns have been hampered by problems, including lack of political commitment. Here on the continent, Director for the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, John Nkengasong, says Africa has now reported over 10 million COVID cases, and that the death toll currently stands at over 223,000, with the majority reported in South Africa, which accounted for 35% of the total. He also mentioned during his press briefing today that over 10% of the African population is now fully vaccinated.
We have another variant that emerged, like the Omicron, and just imagine if Omicron was that transmissible and also very severe and was overwhelming our hospital system. The only way to relieve that would be if we have the drugs, like the Paxlovid, where people can take that drug and stay home and get relief. And that way the burden and or the constraints on the health system will be limited. So today, January the 13th, a total of 10.1 million cases of COVID-19 have been reported on the continent. So we've hit an important milestone of 10 million cases. Of that number, 223,000 individuals have unfortunately died. A total of 46 countries are now experiencing a fourth wave. And of that number, 28 of them, that is 61%, are experiencing a very severe fourth wave. A total of 39 countries in Africa are now reporting the Omicron variant. The continent also recorded a total of 2,680 new deaths, and that represents an 85% increase in number of new deaths if you compare that to last week. The total coverage, which is defined as the number of people that have received their full immunization, 2 doses of other vaccines or the 1 dose of Johnson & Johnson, is 10.1%.
I want to bring in now Chairman, Experts Review Committee on COVID-19 here in Nigeria, Professor Oyewale Tomori. He joins us from Ibadan. Professor, thank you for joining me on the program and a happy new year to you.
Same to you, Amarachi.
It appears that while we're hoping for an end to the epidemic or the pandemic, the discovery of new variants means that we may continue to be dealing with COVID for a long time. How are these variants developing and how can we attribute them to what can we attribute them to? Is it a lack of or inadequate COVID-19 vaccinations?
I think it's a combination of, most important, I think, is the fact that we're allowing the virus to spread. We're not using the non-pharmaceutical interventions to curb the spread of the virus. And so long as the virus is spreading, it's going to start mutating and create variants. And then because we're getting a poor level of immunization in different people not a very few percentage fully immunized, some partially immunized, the virus is developing and escaping and coming up with different things, evading those immunity and ending up with the variants that we are coming. The greatest problem we're having in the world, I mean, look around, whether it's Delta or Omicron, is the variants. And so long as we allow this virus to spread and create variants, we are going to have COVID with us for a long time to come.
Yeah, and people are now being encouraged to receive booster shots. So what's the assurance then that this is helping to prevent or reduce COVID cases? Because there are still many cases on the rise in many countries.
You know, the issue of vaccination, I think it is important for people to get the full thing. When you get vaccinated, it's not the day you get vaccinated that you are immunized. It takes a little bit of time, 10 days to 14 days. And 1 dose is not enough in some people. You need to get the second dose. And also now we're seeing a booster dose because the immunity wanes much faster than was thought for other viruses like yellow fever, for example. Why yellow fever may wane about 5-6 years, this is coming on in less than maybe 6 months, 1 month. So you need to keep putting the boosters. And the boosters are are needed because of the variants. So I think let's get back to the mathematics. If there are no variants, then people will be better. Yes, immunity will still wane, but you don't have a virus that will give you serious illness. And therefore, the boosters are being put to counter the variants that are coming. So it is back to the basics. If we take care of the variants, then we can at least have some relief from having boosters. It will not be within every 6 months or every time a variant comes out. It may take a little longer and relieve the pressure of getting people vaccinated.
So when is the best time to receive the booster, especially if you have already been double vaccinated?
Well, you see, there's a time, depend again, usually they give it in about 3 months, 6 months. It depends on what time your immunity wanes, and it varies from one individual. So what people do is to have a range. 3 months after you've gotten your second dose, thereafter you can get another one, because then it is so that even if your immunity is still there, when you get that booster, it boosts your immunity up. And I think it is important to let people know that we are giving boosters now because mainly I keep stressing because of the variants that are coming. And that's the greatest problem that is confronting the world right now.
Yeah, Professor, we're slowly getting over, the blame game that we saw last year with different African leaders saying, because, the West did not give enough vaccines and because, they also gave expired vaccines and so on is the reason for the rising number. You think there is still as much drive for vaccinations, especially here on the continent, than there was initially when they were touted to be the best protection against COVID, seeing as now we have more breakthrough cases of COVID-19 on the rise?
From beginning, I think it was, well, I don't know how to put it. I want to say wrong, but I don't think it was right for us to start blaming those people for whatever was happening. People talk about racism, they talk about inequity, but then we need to go back to asking ourselves the questions. Why did we get to this level? How come when the vaccines were there, we're not buying and others were buying? We need to begin to ask ourselves questions, because we're repeating this same equity, whatever, paranoia, whatever, since independence. That means 60 years or more, and we're still saying the same thing. And then time for us, they know what the alternatives are. It may not be for COVID, but for future. Nigeria, every other African country must put money into their science and development, science and research, which is what those countries have done. They've put a lot of money into this, and that has given them the product of the vaccines they're getting. And we are becoming just a consuming nation. We should be contributors. So let our government put money into science and technology. Even now, those other countries are still putting a lot of money into science and technology to get to be where we are. They are thinking of developing new vaccines on a regular basis. But we sit down here and keep complaining, oh, they are being racist, they are being this one. Well, if you have a problem, and I ask a question, if you turn the situation around, it was Africa that was having the problem, and it was having the way people are dying, and Africa has the vaccine, will you give it to Europe? Let's be fair to each other.
Indeed, Professor Oyewale Tomori, thank you so much for your candid analysis on the issue. And do stay safe.
Thank you very much, Amarachi.
Let's head to the UK, where the minimum COVID-19 self-isolation will be cut from 5 days to 5 days from 7 if someone tests negative twice, a move that could reduce staffing disruptions in businesses and infrastructure. That's according to Health Minister Sajid Javid. The rapid spread of the Omicron variant has fueled a spike in COVID-19 cases to record highs in Britain, though the rollout of booster shots and the lesser severity of the variant has meant hospitalizations and deaths have not risen as sharply.
Unable to live their lives as they want or to do the things.
And so this comes as more reactions trailed Prime Minister Boris Johnson's apology to MPs yesterday over a garden party they held at number 10 Downing Street on May 20, 2020. SNP MP Patricia Gibson asked how, if the Prime Minister cannot follow his own rules, a Health Secretary can continue to follow them. Tory MP Rees-Mogg says the Prime Minister has been consistently making the right decisions on COVID. The Prime Minister has cancelled a planned visit to Lancashire because of a family member who has tested positive for COVID. He'd been due to visit a vaccination centre this morning. Despite uncertainty about his visa, world tennis number one Novak Djokovic has been confirmed in the Australian Open draw at a delayed ceremony today. A 34-year-old defending champion was bracketed to play unseeded fellow Serb Miomir Kecmanovic in the first round of Melbourne Park after organisers delayed the draw for more than an hour without explanation. Tournament director Craig Tilley declined to take questions at the end of the subdued ceremony, with Australian Immigration Minister Alex Hawke still weighing whether to revoke Djokovic's visa for a second time after it was cancelled on arrival at Melbourne Airport. Djokovic's inclusion in the draw was greeted with skepticism on social media, with fans predicting organisers would have to do another draw before the tournament starts on Monday.
We start with our number 1 seed for the tournament, Novak Djokovic, on line number 1. Line 128, our number 2 seed, Daniil Medvedev. Moving on to seeds 3 and 4. First one drawn onto line 33. Thank you. We're going to start with the women's singles draw. We will be randomly placing, firstly, the unseeded players. If we could kindly place those now. Thank you very much.
Still watching the world today on Channels Television. Still ahead. Virtual reality helps relieve history of the Notre Dame in France. Welcome back to the program. A court in Germany has sentenced a former intelligence officer in Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's security services to life in prison after convicting him of murder, rape, and crimes against humanity in a landmark trial. Anwar Arm had been charged with 58 murders, rape, and sexual assault at a prison facility in Damascus and was supervised by an intelligence unit he headed. He had denied all charges. A ruling was the second handed down at the same trial at the higher regional court in western German city of Koblenz. It was the world's first criminal case brought over state-led torture during Syria's civil war, which began in 2011. Last year, Iyad A., another former member of the Syrian intelligence service, was handed a 4.5-year prison sentence for abetting the torture of civilians. A current president of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, Poland, has warned that Europe is closer to war than it has been at any time in the last 30 years. Poland's Foreign Minister Zbigniew Ro said this at the launch of the country's year-long chairmanship of the region's largest security organization. Without naming Russia, in his address to envoys from the 57-member organization, Rao mentioned tensions in Ukraine, Georgia, Armenia, and Moldova, all countries active or frozen conflicts in which Russia has been alleged to be a party.
The latest development, it seems that the risk of war in the OSCE area is now greater than ever before in the last 30 years. In this vein, we should focus on a peaceful resolution of the conflict in and around Ukraine, in compliance with the Minsk agreements and in full respect of the sovereignty, territorial integrity and unity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders.
He also says there has been no breakthrough in the OSCE Vienna talks aimed at diffusing tensions over Russia's demand that Ukraine never be allowed to join NATO. Russia has deployed more than 100,000 troops near its borders with Ukraine, which is also battling Moscow-backed separatists in the east. Russia annexed Ukraine's Crimea region in 2014. Well, staying with Russia, tank units have held drills in the Rostov region, neighboring Ukraine. The drills come at a time when representatives of Russia and NATO met for talks in Brussels on security in the region. Russia has perturbed the West by building up troops near Ukraine and demanded that Washington pledge not to ever let Ukraine join NATO or expand the military alliance eastward, a stipulation that the United States refuses to accept. Moscow has said it has no intention of attacking Ukraine and has every right to move around its soldiers on its own territory and to carry out military drills as it sees fit. More bilateral talks. Britain and India have formally launched a free trade agreement talks in New Delhi with the aim of wrapping up a deal by the end of the year that could boost annual bilateral trade by billions of pounds. During a meeting earlier today, Indian Trade Minister Piyush Goyal and his British counterpart Anne-Marie Trevelyan said they would also launch an early harvest or a limited scope interim trade agreement in the next few months before finalizing the free trade agreement. India is seeking greater opportunities for Indians to live and work in Britain, and any trade deal could be contingent on relaxing rules and lowering fees for Indian students and professionals going to Britain.
Through our commitment, this is an opportunity that we must seize to steer our partnership with purpose onto the track of mutual prosperity for those decades to come. We aim for this to be a future-facing deal, accelerating the business that we do together in the cutting-edge sectors that are reshaping the global economy. Through our commitment to a new and transformational comprehensive strategic partnership and the 2030 roadmap for future UK-India relations, we aim to double trade between our countries by the end of this decade, supporting jobs, businesses and communities in both our countries. This is part and
Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has broken his silence over the military coup in neighboring Sudan and the ongoing protests calling for civilian rule. Egypt has faced accusations of siding with Sudan's head of military, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, but President al-Sisi has dismissed the claims. He called on both the military rulers and the protesters to embrace dialogue to end the political crisis. Separately, he said he is disappointed by the breakdown of talks between Egypt, Ethiopia and Sudan over the construction of a dam on the River Nile, which has been a source of a decades-long dispute between the countries. We end in Europe, a new virtual reality experience allowing people to visit the Notre Dame Cathedral throughout the ages has launched in France. And while you may not be able to go physically into the cathedral, you can experience history while awaiting its reopening in 2024.
The immersive experience takes visitors through a 45-minute-long trip, complete with visual and sound effects, going from the construction of the iconic Parisian landmark to the fire that ravaged it in 2019. The areas virtually recreated include the surroundings of the cathedral as it was being built in the Middle Ages, the inside of the building during a service, or the top of one of the towers nowadays, among others. French historical figures such as Eugène Viollet-le-Duc, who is an architect, or former President Charles de Gaulle, guide people through the various eras covered. Visitor and cultural outreach for the French Center for National Monuments, Edouard de Lemley, says is impressed by the fact that it allows a dive back in time. The project was developed over 2 years by a team of 50 people employed by French virtual reality startup Emissive, including various historians and architects. It is fully financed by French telecom company Orange. It will be accessible for a fee of €30 per person and is expected to open later on in other cities around the world such as New York, Rome and Moscow. Notre Dame is set to reopen to the public in 2024 as Paris welcomes the 2024 Olympic Games.
And that's the world today. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubadu.